This podcast is recorded on stolen and unceded Aboriginal land.
We acknowledge the First Nations and elders of this country, and we join their calls for justice.
Serious danger to Australia.
Yoo-hoo! But first, coffee. That's what you said.
Don't you dare talk to me before I had my coffee. Hello, patrons. Thank you very much for listening to this show. It's Serious Danger. It's me, Tom, and Emerald Moon.
Hey.
This is not an official Greens Party podcast. It's made possible with the help of the Green Institute, produced by Michael the Griffin. This is bonus content. Thank you so much for supporting our show. This episode is coming out on International Women's Day 2023. Congratulations, Emerald. Thank you for all your womanness.
Happy me. You're welcome. I was hoping you could mansplain to me about International Women's Day and gender politics and periods and, feminism and stuff.
I'd like to. I'm just worried that your brain might not.
I won't understand it, but I can try.
Be big enough.
That's all I can do
to deal with it. But yes, we're going to get into that. Very quickly, want to tease that in the coming weeks, we're going to be making some announcements about a live show, if you want to come Serious Danger Live, that won't be happening at a Greens National Conference. It'll be at a cool place and ordinary cool people will be able to come. And we will announce those details here for patrons first. First and foremost, you guys will get in quick. So keep an ear out and you might be able to come and see us live in the flesh.
Fans only. Fan only tickets.
The real ones. The real ones only. Emerald, International Women's Day. Women. Mm-hmm. Do we need them? Discuss.
He's literally written down this question in the show doc. Women, do we need them?
And what is a woman, would you say? I think that's the question that we need to ask.
That's the real question. Do we need them? Well, the hot take is yes. And also, so does capitalism. But also, so does the revolution.
Oh, God. Okay, everyone needs them. I see.
Everyone needs a woman.
What about men? When's International Men's Day? When are we getting that?
Is that in November, October, September?
Oh,
it
exists?
It is
literally in that one.
I think it is one of those.
What do you think about the day? What do you think about International Women's Day? Have you had any great International Women's Day events in your time?
No. I am struggling to think of any memorable International Women's Day events at all, actually. This is bad content, but what I remember is the time, it was even before I really got involved, but the legacy lives on that the Queensland Greens accidentally signed on to co-run or put our logo on a TERF International Women's Day march. This was probably back in 2016, 2017, something like that. Yeah. We were like, fuck, oopsie. And since then, we have implemented more strict protocols to confirm who people are before we support their events.
Yes, everything has to go through Emerald, I hope. And look, maybe we'll get to it, and we want to talk about other stuff further day. But it is sort of anxiety inducing to me almost with such a charged atmosphere when it comes to
have
gender.
Women in charge. You get really stressed. Yeah. Oh,
I'm scared they're going to abolish men. No, with the horrific culture war debate surrounding trans rights and women's rights, and again, this bullshit horrific question used to further marginalize people. This question: what is a woman? Who deserves to claim womanhood, etc. I mean, it's I don't know. I when I think of International Women's Day coming up, I just can't help but think, oh God, this is going to be by some quarters, by the TERF quarters, is going to be a horrific. I don't like the term politicization. Everything's political, but this treatment of this day as a way to attack trans women and trans rights.
Yeah, because everything is an opportunity for those people to attack trans women, twans women,
the twans women
and twans whites. It's just silly, but that's how it is. So fucking silly because I suppose maybe we haven't done a dedicated episode on this, and I guess we can at some point, but I'm even hesitant to spend any time buying into this false dichotomy between women's rights and trans rights, because there is no conflict, because all are oppressed under patriarchy and under capitalism.
Yes.
And the objective of, a women's liberation movement or a feminist movement should be to fight against both of those structural forces. and all of the premises on which anti-trans activists or lobbyists or campaigners rest their argument are always like these kind of, hyper-specific hypotheticals that don't actually play out in reality.
Yeah.
And it's just the kind of campaigning that I'm like, I just don't have time for you to like sit about pontificating about what if a trans woman wanted to, I don't know, be in the change room and they also happen to actually be pretending to be trans for some reason because people would definitely want to do that. And they also happened to want to sexually assault someone in the change room and that happened. And it's like, okay, meanwhile, there are just actual instances of like sexual assault just happening all the time that I actually care about. I just don't care about your little hypothetical scenario that's really just designed to exclude certain types of people from your little movement.
Yeah. Did you see the crazy story out of the UK this week of a Tory councillor going into a bathroom, having a conversation with a trans woman? This is at a pub. And then, according to this Tory councillor, they were going to shake hands or something, and the trans woman said, "Oh, I'll just wipe my hands on my penis." She goes to the Daily Mail. This is all written up as a full story in the Daily Mail.
Super real.
She was just so offended. This goes. Then a trans woman in question, who was like a YouTuber with a decent social media following, is like,
"Did she just say pants?
I think this is me. I said jeans, you fucking moron. I will wipe my hands on my jeans."
Because the Tory councillor is just only thinking penis.
This is exactly what she said.
Penis,
she could only see trans women big dick.
With genitals.
Obsessed. Incredible. It just gets this massive run, of course, in the media and on Turf Island, which is the UK. Of course, it went far and wide. Another example of how trans women are coming to kill us all.
Yeah.
Just
keeping in mind, like, we're talking about feminism. This is a type of feminism that will tell you that women are not included in the category of people. And that should probably tell you something about the way that they view women and gender. So, if you're upset about me saying people because that apparently doesn't include women, maybe you need to reassess your own fucking internalized misogyny.
I am not a person. I am a woman.
Yeah, okay. Don't call me a person. How dare you include me on the same category as every other human being.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
Well, we should do what all good leftists should do on this particular day. And yes, I'm sure people listening to this podcast might be familiar with probably Jacobin writes an article about this every year, I think, or there's at least a good effort amongst Red Flag and the left to just sort of reiterate, hey, everyone, this thing that you see, once again, corporations getting involved with and the avalanche of International Women's Day stuff that's going to be coming from our teal representative will ignore the socialist history of International Women's Day. What was originally International Working Women's Day absolutely came out of an anti-capitalist, socialist, anti-imperialist movement. And it's extremely cool. I really like reading about it, right? It's good news. Yeah.
And just extremely funny to like contrast with the way that this day is represented today. So it was a celebration in 1909 of the 1908 garment workers strikes, because the first, International Women's Day, Working Women's Day movements, one of the main things that they were fighting for was the right to unionize, as well as the right to vote, right to equal pay, and yes, often against war in sort of the 1910s. So that was, the US Socialist Party did that in 1909. And then the next year, the European version was created by the Socialist International. They met in Copenhagen and passed the motion that the socialist women of all countries will hold each year a Women's Day. The foremost purpose would be about women's suffrage, but the demand must be handled in conjunction with the entire women's question according to socialist precepts. So it's got to be socialist. The first rallies in Australia as well were organised, as I understand it, in the 1920s by the Militant Working Group, which was one of the Communist Party's many like fronts or subgroups or whatever. Mm-hmm. And yes, there's interesting history on that. But I thought it was funny to contrast that Copenhagen motion with the way that International Women's Day is described on like the UN website. The first thing that comes up if you look up International Women's Day is like the UN website. It says International Women's Day is celebrated in many countries around the world. It is a day when women are recognised for their achievements without regard to divisions, whether national, ethnic, linguistic, cultural, economic, or political.
What does
It's
that
like,
mean?
No differences. We're just women. The one unifying thing that you have, like, we're not going to talk about all of the other factors of oppression. You're just women, and good for you.
I've seen some people say it's becoming Mother's Day, basically. It's just being
Yes, that's so fucking true.
It's just women exist. Isn't that awesome? Isn't that
That's
great?
so good. You know what? Love you guys. Great work.
Love you guys.
Sorry, you women.
Let's do breakfast in bed because it's your special day.
Yeah.
And I think it's important too to mention, like, from the outset, as you say, really explicit, working class conscious socialist focus, and was defined by the socialist left-wing women who set it up and who organized, in contrast to a bourgeois liberal feminism, right? Saying that is not us, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And this is just a brief extract from a piece that was published in Pravda in 1913, sort of around the time when these, first big conferences and the first days are being celebrated. What is the aim of the feminists? Their aim is to achieve the same advantages, the same power, the same rights within capitalist society as those possessed now by their husbands, fathers, and brothers. What is the aim of the women workers? Their aim is to abolish all privileges deriving from birth or wealth. For the woman worker, it is a matter of indifference who is the master, a man or a woman. Right? We don't see gender, actually. Together with the whole of her class, she can ease her position as a worker. So
that's
again,
a great quote.
It's a great quote, and just this great reminder that, again, it's like, these talk about, there's not enough women on the FTSE 100. It's like, no. I don't give a shit about the number of female CEOs. It's about the abolition of CEOs as a category, because that is fundamentally oppressive and anti-democratic and bad.
Well, and of course, the next paragraph, I believe, went on to say it's about pink cupcakes.
Yes.
And morning
that's
teas.
That's
and
important.
Breakfasts. And shiny awards. Right?
What are the worst ones you've seen? The corporatization of International Women's Day. What have you seen?
The one example that stands out is like the Queensland Resources Council does a big awards ceremony where they invite all of the, coal and gas and other mining and resources companies on International Women's Day. And there are, like, every year BHP, one of the attendees, does a little media release about how wonderful women are and how they're recognising women. And
women in STEM. Women in STEM. Yep.
Yeah, women in STEM. And one of the media releases quoted this woman who was nominated for one of the awards saying, "I am a strong advocate for empowering the next generation, and Hay Point Coal Terminal is aligned with this vision." The next generation, they'll absolutely thank us for more coal and gas. We know it only too well.
Coal terminal, yes.
For my daughter, new coal and gas for my daughters and their daughters and their daughters, in the fiery hellscape of a destroyed climate.
The future is female and on fire. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Some good ones I found researching this. SodaStream, this is from last year, I think. SodaStream released a special International Women's Day flask with she packaging, which they said they hope will let every woman know that they can make a change for the planet just by going reusable. The brand is encouraging women to share stories of fellow inspiring women on Instagram, donating a generous $1 to female empowerment organizations and programs for every post correctly tagged with @SodaStream and #she. And that is capping those donations at $10,000.
Oh, right. Okay. Very
so
generous.
it's free advertising. So you just give $10,000 to a charity. But no. We got to get something out of this. We got to get brand awareness. We got to get followers. We got to go viral, please.
Isn't SodaStream also like a supporter of apartheid in Palestine?
100%, yes.
Like had their factory in disputed territory. Yeah. That's good.
Real good.
No women affected by that. Yeah.
Nope.
No Palestinian women displaced from their homes or, women and children killed by Israeli Defense Force.
Hey, are we occupying you in an apartheid regime? Tag us on Instagram at SodaStream.
Yes. We will send you $1 with which you may be able to buy a rock to throw at us.
The best one, of course, people might remember this in 2018. McDonald's went all out. I mean, again, incredible organization that is a real ally. In celebration of women everywhere, for the first time in our brand history, we flipped our iconic arches for International Women's Day in honor of the extraordinary accomplishments of women everywhere and especially in our restaurants, said McDonald's Chief Diversity Officer Wendy Lewis.
Oh,
From restaurant crew and management to our C-suite of senior leadership, women play invaluable roles at all levels. And together with our independent franchise owners, we're committed to their success.
wow. You know what?
Now, actually, I was looking it up. I was like trying to find an example of McDonald's being shit. But actually, in 2022, at least according to McDonald's, they believe they've closed the gender pay gap within their organization between men and women. Now,
That's so awesome.
which is, I guess, fine for the executives and stuff. But also, yes, what that obviously distracts from is the fact that they have fucking teenagers working and being exploited in their restaurants for less than a living wage. And they
Maybe
won't be
girls
changing
aren't
that
included,
anytime
only
soon.
women. So
Yes.
teenage girls don't count.
Incredible stuff. But thank you so much, McDonald's, for being brave. I hope you do that artist thing again this year. That would be a beacon for all the women in my life. I know that would mean a lot to my mum and to Emerald.
It does. It does mean a lot to me. I mean, what do you think? Like, obviously, the way that the majority of International Women's Day events and like measures are framed is just horrifically useless and depressing. What should it be at this point, Tom, as a man?
Thank you so much. Finally, my voice
Finally
is being
asking.
recognized. Well, what should it be? I mean, look, how much do days do? I remember once I looked up how many days there are a year, official days.
There's
every year.
365, Tom. You really should have learnt that in school.
Touche. No, how many official cause days there are, whatever, and people might know there are all these ridiculous weeks and all these insane sort of things. And I guess if they raise a level of awareness and they raise some money for some good causes, they're fine. But for International Women's Day, I mean, yes, if we're talking about material questions, all the problems that we're talking about, the biggest issues in feminism, in defeating patriarchy, in emancipating women, in making a more just, more democratic and better society. I mean, they're all, of course, the left-wing things that we're banging on about all the time, about empowering workers through organized labor by tearing down the horrors of capitalism and the way it distorts our democracy and political system, et cetera, et cetera. It's doing something about the fucking police and their inability to protect us and keep us safe.
Yeah.
Just have a be left-wing day and make it year-long.
Well, yeah. I mean, it would be cool for a socialist women's movement to come together on a particular day and celebrate those things that we continue to fight for. I mean, to me, the challenge now, for a socialist women's movement is disrupting that illusion of an innate sexual difference based on, gender or sex. And particularly in light of the way that supports a capitalist economic system. And that's, I think, we've spoken about briefly on the show before, but the work of people like Silvia Federici and Maria Della Costa and the wages for housework movements in, the 80s, I suppose. That's probably wrong. I don't know. Don't cancel me for being bad at remembering theory things. But those things still ring true, obviously, to a lesser extent. There's, because there's greater participation of women in the workforce, which works really well for capitalism. But there is still an expectation that women will perform the vast bulk of reproductive labor to produce, labor as a resource for capital. And a whole lot of ways that women's sexuality and role in society is governed by socially and by the state that helps keep that in check and use the family to kind of advance the objectives of the state and capital. But yes, and there's also there's the fights to keep, I guess it's keeping an eye on that prize and not getting distracted by the bullshit about whether that also should include trans women. That ain't it really for me. It seems as well. So I was telling you I'd been reading, and there's a lot of stuff that I found interesting in this book that we probably don't have time to talk about, but I read, I think it's Amir Srinivasan's book, The Right to Sex. It's a collection of essays that kind of questions the liberal consent framework, the idea of just, consensual versus non-consensual sexual and romantic relationships in a feminist framework, and whether that's adequate the capacity of laws and the state to solve the problems that we have for a women's liberation movement or a social feminist movement. And how that bumps up against the way that the women's movement has kind of framed itself in recent years. Like, what were those marches called around that were like mad at Morrison?
Like inspired by Brittany Higgins?
Yeah.
Okay, right. It was March for Justice?
March for Justice. Yeah, it was just March for Justice. Those things. But still like framed even kind of leftovers of like the hashtag Me Too movement, and still this like carceral feminism that is like, we need stronger laws to police violent men and that will save us. And we need, greater policing. We need to criminalize coercive control to protect women from domestic violence. We need stronger regulations in Parliament, anti-discrimination laws, things like that.
Codes of conduct.
Ignoring again the way that those don't in any way threaten the power of capital estate, and also disproportionately end up, disadvantaging poor people, Black and brown people, working people,
Yeah. I mean, there was just stuff out this week that the union density has fallen to 12% now, right? So it's even trending down. And yes, the idea that you can introduce this code of conduct is a very professionalized white collar approach to something like discrimination in the workforce against women, when you would hope that if you actually want to solve that stuff, the massive wins in the workplace when it comes to fighting against sexism and fighting for a better deal for female workers has been through organising and going on strike and those kind of wins. Yeah. So really all the teals who will be having a great day today should be saying, hey, everyone, join your union if they were serious about making women's lives better in the workforce. That's my opinion.
Yeah, and it's worth noting as well. I think a lot of Greens policy is still stuck in this like
totally
anti-discrimination frame, anti-violence frame. I don't know really where our policies are and if they're settled in each state and territory around coercive control and whether we should criminalize it. There's this great quote around anti-discrimination policy, and maybe we'll get into what the Greens actually are talking about in terms of women's justice. But this quote from that book by Amir Srinivasan that reads, "Capitalism is well served by the logic of anti-discrimination. Sexist, racist and anti-immigration discrimination disrupt the smooth functioning of meritocracy, potentially depriving capital of the most talented workers. Anti-discrimination measures increase the efficiency of the labour market, leaving its underlying logic, that some people must sell their labour to survive, untouched." Which is very true.
Yes.
We often back in kind of, stronger discrimination act and discrimination commissioner and whatnot. But yes, is that the most important aim? Who can say?
Yeah, well, expanding the welfare state to make people less reliant on wage slavery in order to live a decent life would also empower workers in a massive way. So, and I know this is Greens policy, but expanding dental and mental health into Medicare, free childcare and education, which is Greens policy. So in 2022, we can link through in the show notes the sort of platform summing up the Greens policies designed to end sexism, which, again, love the ambition, but it's great, but it's sort of laying out what the Greens think about that.
That's what we should be aiming to do, though, right?
Yes, absolutely. We should live in a sexist-free society, you're right. The policies were centered around changing the culture in Parliament. That was in the wake of the Brittany Higgins scandal, particularly about how bad Parliament is, which, fair enough, but also, again, a very elite select part of society, but fair enough. Ending rape culture by funding respectful relationships programs in schools, implementing the full Respect at Work recommendations from the Australian Human Rights Commission, which includes a positive duty on employers to prevent sexual harassment and sex-based discrimination in their workplace, and funding working women's centres, which I don't know enough about. I'd like to know more about that. I don't know, but it sounds good.
It does sound good.
That would be good. And again, I think Barbara Pocock, who's spent a huge amount of her time and her academic career on this kind of stuff, knows a fair bit about working Australian women and what would be good. And of course, closing the gender pay gap, which has come up in the news recently as well. The gender pay gap, this is from the Greens website, in Australia is about 13.8%, with men working full-time taking home on average around $25,800 more than women working full-time each year. Paid parental leave and extending that for longer, and free childhood education and childcare. Those were the main policies the Greens are pointing to ahead of the last election to end sexism.
Which, particularly those latter ones, talking about free childhood education and childcare, do go towards those aims of like those radical socialist feminists who were who would argue for the socialization of domestic labor and of care. Like, I think that it was that was maybe Angela Davis's kind of like response to the wages for housework movement is like, don't necessarily just, don't pay women and re-entrench their role as domestic laborers. Instead make it the responsibility of society as a whole. And so really socialize those services.
Yeah.
Dear Tony Abbott, quite clearly, you're a dumb cunt. The only way you can justify being the Minister of Women's Affairs is if there were no women. And even then you would have to change the title to the Minister of Where Are All the Women? However, given your current cabinet, that's probably a justified question.
Finally, we think, obviously we could talk about heaps of different stuff and we'll continue to do so on the show. But I was interested in your thoughts on quotas and when it comes to representation. I think we've talked about on the show the limits of representational politics broadly, but the question of quotas does come up on a regular basis when it comes to, yes, the people that represent us in our supposedly representative democracy. It is still overwhelmingly male. This is from the principles which are endorsed by the party in 2020. The Australian Greens want to actively promote women to stand as candidates for election with the goal of having gender diversity reflecting that of the general community. And in that list of policies in regards to ending sexism, there was a point saying that the Greens party room is 60% female, which I guess might have changed slightly. Well, I guess changed post the election and also with Lydia leaving as well. It might have affected the numbers. But yes, what is your thoughts on the idea of political parties having quotas for gender balance and diversity?
I feel like quotas, particularly for pre-selection, actually just in general, are something that my views still aren't totally settled on. And I kind of go back and forth in my mind, but I tend to lean against quotas because I just don't think that, particularly when it comes to gender, that identity representative aspect is as important as other things. Like, first of all, I think it entrenches this thing that I really dispute about, it's so important who, the individual candidate is, like the character of that candidate and their story and all of that. And to me, I just want to know, like, can they rally and represent a movement behind them? That to me is, I think, the most important thing that we should be looking at. And and what are their politics that they're going to fight for, obviously. And like, we know only too clearly that having more women in power, if they don't have good politics and they're not going to fight for something, absolutely does not do anything for women or for working women in particular, for a socialist movement. And it's again, like, there was discussion in this book that I've been reading about that focus on the common oppression of all women and like looking back at that UN quote about International Women's Day and like the flattening of differences between women in an attempt to focus on the things that they all share. And sure, there's an argument for solidarity between women, but to focus more on the commonalities than the way that women are oppressed by other means, whether it's like race or class or whatever it is as I think, like, as Bell Hooks put it means that the strategies that are then pursued by a women's liberation movement are useless for a lot of those women because we'll end up just pursuing things that work for rich white women. And I think that's, arguably what ended up happening when rich white women co-opted Me Too, even though it was pioneered years earlier by a Black woman. So like, going back to your question about quotas, kind of off track there, but it's like, what does it matter that they're a woman? What are their politics? What are they fighting for?
Yeah, I think it's a little tricky. Again, I'm allergic to this idea that, hey, more women in parliament, we're going to have a more gentle parliament and a more sensitive parliament, my God, and they're just going to know those issues. But I would say when political issues around, say, reproductive rights come up, it is always quite galling to see a room full of men making those kind of judgments on what women should do with their bodies. Now, there are conservative
I feel that way too,
who also fight against, women's reproductive rights. That's certainly a factor. But in the main, a female perspective, the perspective of people with actual uteruses and wombs to bring to the discussion around abortion rights could actually be important. But I think, sometimes the change is marginal. I think you'd say that the quota policy the Labor Party's introduced has certainly resulted in more female MPs. The question is whether that broadly has resulted in transformative change for women and people identified as female. Yeah. So
it's like I agree with that principles, in that principle in the Greens policy that it's like, yes, we should promote women to stand as candidates. It's absolutely true that women a lot of the time will be less likely to think that they would be a good candidate, to put their hand up for being a candidate because they have been socialized not to put their hand up for anything, not to think that they could be a good leader, to think that, there's someone else who could do it better. And so our movement should, as it should with other people who are in that category, like people of color or poor people, should be actively reminding women that they should stand and that they would be great at it if they would be.
Yeah.
And I agree, our parliament should reflect, the broader makeup of our community. But I don't know whether, a quota is the first thing that I'd fight for. I would probably focus my energies on finding someone who can rally a movement that can win and that can win political change that will materially improve the lives of women, and particularly
people who can fight for policies that they're bound by, that have been democratically elected and conceived, right? So we work as a party to come up with great policies that will make women's lives better, and then whoever gets elected are bound to implement and fight for those policies, right? Again, that's I think that's also what's inherent in the idea of the individual character of candidates, because of course, they're just sort of freewheeling, and they're not bound to the democratic will of the membership of the party they represent. They'll just make whatever the fuck they want. But if we want to change that, if we want to do politics differently and say, no, we as a party come up with these policies, and even if you win an election, you still are duty bound to represent those policies that we democratically have determined, then it really does matter way less exactly who's filling that role.
Which is how our politics and our ideology are kind of, in some ways fundamentally opposed to that of the Teals, for example, when the entire premise is that they don't have a movement behind them that determines what they do. They say they have volunteers and everything, but they have no democratically decided platform on which they're campaigning. It's all about who are they and how by them being in Parliament, they'll make it a nicer place because it won't be a man, it will be a woman.
Girl bosses. Just a huge army of girl bosses.
Thank you to all our lovely girl bosses and boy bosses out there listening right now, our girl patrons, our patronesses.
You know what, girl? You treat yourself. You have a brunch and a mimosa and you enjoy your IWD.
Yes, we're so happy for you, and we can't wait for the day that it is not incumbent on you to perform all of the reproductive labour in our society, and potentially also sell your labour to capitalists who will profit from it. Thank you.
But also, we really want you to build up a great portfolio and just represent your success through success in the capitalist markets.
Speaking of capitalist markets, thank you for being a patron. We love it when you give us $3 a month or more, because it's really nice and it helps us pay Mike. If you want to do things that help us even more, please consider leaving us a 5-star review and some words about why you like the show on wherever you're listening, like Apple Podcasts or whatever platform you're on. Also, if you only listen to the audio version, you should check out the YouTube. You can watch us there, watch our little heads. You can like and subscribe, of course. And the other thing that really helps is following us and sharing our content on social media so that all your friends can also see us. We're at Serious Danger AU on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. And you can find all the info at seriousdangerpod.com.
Bye, sisters.
Bye, sisters.
Yeah.
That's with an S, not a C.
Serious danger to Australia.